Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott, where I talk all about life, love, spirituality, wellness, health, recovery, trauma, witchy things, tarot, feminine energy, and everything in between. And I hope you guys are having a really lovely day whenever it is that you happen to be listening to this. And okay, let's just launch right into it. This is my second attempt at recording on this topic. I have actually never deleted an attempt or a recording on a topic. I don't script my episodes. I just say what I have to say, hit record, whatever, and then upload it. But with that one, I think there's aspects of it that are just so personal. I was like, oh God, not ready to say this yet. So stay posted. I'll probably write a book about something along what I did say and then deleted at some point. But let's launch into what I do feel called to say on this topic, regardless. So this is inspired by obviously like my own life experience, but also I recently binged the Gabby Petito documentary on Netflix, and so that also very much inspired this episode. And I know a lot of people are sick of hearing about her story, probably especially my American friends. But being in Canada, we actually didn't really hear too much about that story up here. At least I didn't. It wasn't really in the news. I had to search it out if I wanted to find updates. Like the Canadian media really didn't super care about that story. And so I was hungry for a documentary about it. I know a lot of Americans are like, oh God, like we could not escape it on the news. I know how the American media is. You guys chill with the story for a long ass time and every single update. And like to be honest, I'm not mad about that. Like I appreciate that dogged tenacity in following up on stories that I think are interesting and important. And I do think this particular story is interesting and important. If I could just plug another podcast, I recently listened to, I think, the 20 episodes about the Gabby Petito situation on a podcast called Crime Analyst. And I won't say too much about it, but the short version is if you are looking for a really intelligent woman's take on it. I think she created don't quote me on this. This is a new podcast to me, but I'm pretty sure she was involved with the coercive control legislation in Scotland, which is incredibly important. So, in my opinion, the coercive control legislation and things of that nature are kind of the next frontier in preventing violence against women and preventing and I guess prosecuting violence and abusive relationships. Like coercive control is kind of that unspoken part that a lot of people don't know about, don't talk about. I'll probably do another episode specifically about coercive controls. It is a topic I do think should get more play. I do think more people should be talking about this concept. So anyway, I brought that podcast up. So if you are interested in analysis. She went really, really, really in depth from a kind of criminal profiling, abuse psychology, victimology perspective, and that is a depth of knowledge that I personally don't have. And she killed it. Super interesting. I learned a lot. And so, if you are someone who does want to learn more about the specifics, and she really gets into the nitty-gritty, like word by word, she analyzes it. So, if that is something that you want to learn more about, whether that's just for knowledge sake, to keep yourself safe in the future, to keep your friends safe, to really take another look at your relationship, or perhaps you have a daughter or a child and you want to make sure that you give them the best possible advice and notice any red flags. So I just think it's important knowledge everyone should have. Anyway, on to the actual topic of today's episode. So, what I want to talk about today is how love does not matter. Love does not matter. And so, you guys are probably thinking, like, oh my God, Sabrina, you're so positive and optimistic. How could you ever say that love doesn't matter? And why would you say that in response to the Gabby Petito documentary? So, let me tell you. So obviously, I love love. I think love is great. I think love is beautiful. It's something that I really enjoy experiencing for the most part, and that is what I seek out in my connections. I think it's a beautiful thing. However, what I don't like and what I see a lot of, and what I think the Gabby Petito situation is a great example of, and a great warning sign to all of us that love, quote unquote, and I think we can have a debate on whether or not, um, they were in love, quote unquote. Love is not enough. And I think people sometimes will end up in these situations where they're in love. They think they're in love. Maybe they are in love. Maybe the other person says that they love you. And that love is used to avoid, ignore, sidestep everything else in the relationship that could potentially be really bad, really harmful, really controlling. It is really common for abusers to say, I just do this because I love you. I, you know, delete all the contacts in your phone. I don't let you see your friends. I sabotage everything that you're trying to do with your career. It's just because I love you, just because I care about you, and no one else is going to love and care about you as much as I do. That is a typical abusive person refrain. And it's also very common for many women, especially, but I've also seen it with men to some extent as well. I do think abuse is generally gendered. I like the statistics can't be argued with. Like, that is an absolute fact. Does that mean that men can't be abused? Of course not. Like, men do end up in abusive relationships with women. That's for sure a thing. And so, this, of course, is about anyone who is in that kind of situation, regardless of your sex or gender or anything like that. But I'll just use these kind of normative gender signifiers just for the sake of ease. I don't want to keep giving my little gender disclaimer here. But I've seen a lot of women make excuses for men they love. Like just saying like, "Oh, I love him. He treats me like crap or he makes me cry all the time, but I love him." And a lot of women don't even like they just associate. They don't even see that he treats me like crap part. They're just like, "Oh, he's just like this because of this. He's like this because his dad never loved him, or he's always had problems with women, or he experienced abuse as a child, and that's why he just acts out all the time. And I love him." And what we see with this is women or abused people using love as, I don't want to say an excuse, that's not quite the right word, but they will use love as a lens through which to see everything, and it's an unhealthy view of love, first of all. And that's a whole other conversation, but they will just use love as like as the most important thing. It's like, well, I love him and he treats me like shit, but it doesn't matter. Like, oh, he's always cheating on me every day, but I love him and he loves me, and we're just, this whole thing is happening, but it's okay. We love each other and we're gonna get through it, blah blah blah. And of course, most of the time, this behavior never changes. And I've heard it so many times, and like obviously, my younger self, like ages ago, has been there. I think most of us have been there at one point, even if it wasn't very long. Like a lot of us, especially in our adolescence, like most adolescents have incredibly unhealthy dating relationships and even friendships. If people have heard of like frenemies between girls and women and that kind of love-hate dynamic that is so common in groups and communities of women, there's a similar thing going on. Like the love and hate dichotomy it's not really a dichotomy. In those shitty situations, those abusive and dysfunctional relationships, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Obviously, to me, I would say that like real love does not look that way. Like real love does not abuse you. Real love does not make you cry every day. Real love is not someone you have to be afraid of, you know? And I would also say if you really love someone truly, probably you're not cheating on them every fucking week or whatever it happens to be. You're probably also not going to, in Gabby Petito's case, like, kill the girl. Like if you actually love her, like probably not. But the flip side of all of that is like this word love, like we can debate what that actually means, right? Like I don't think that abuse is love at all. But that word love gets used to describe the feelings and the situation. So that is why I'm using it here. And I think a lot of the time people will use this word love to ignore all the other bad things. And yeah, love can be difficult to find at times. I totally get it. But I just hate how that love is used. That is going to trump everything. We'll get through the worst time ever because we love each other. And I actually don't think that that's a good way to look at things. I don't think that's true either. Sometimes it might be true, but in the case of, let's say, abusive and incredibly dysfunctional relationships, I really, I think I hate when the word love is used to sidestep the reality of what is really happening, the abuse, the dysfunction, etc. Something unsustainable and unhealthy is going on. And I think so many of us are so desperate to be loved, especially women, but also some men, that we put up with so much crazy shit. And I think the signs are always there, usually. And many of us don't walk within the first few months when we should, and end up in these horrible situations, sometimes due to a fear that there will be no one else who will love us. Obviously, in my world, self-love is the most important thing, and we have to love ourselves above all else, in my opinion. And I always choose myself, and really highly recommend everyone else also does that. When we choose ourselves in a healthy, loving way, we create, I think, a good example for everyone around us. But again, that's a whole other episode. But my main point here, if I can just hammer it home again, is that so many people are so desperate to be loved that they forget what love actually is. And they will think that an intense infatuation or an intense care, or most likely an intense emotional addiction to somebody, an intense attraction, a compulsion towards somebody, which is usually, again, a kind of disorganized attachment thing when it's like addictive in nature. And I could make another episode about the specifics of that as well. People just, that's not what love is. They just get so compelled and addicted, etc., to these situations. And when it becomes that unhealthy, compulsive thing, like you guys will recall if you saw the documentary, she was crying after he had just hit her, and yet she didn't want to be away from him. There is an obviously addictive quality to that psychologically. And I think many people who have been in abusive, dysfunctional relationships will know exactly what I'm talking about. And there is that thing where it becomes really hard to, let's say, go no contact, go cold turkey, leave, whatever it is. And I'm not sure what the statistic is for men leaving abusive relationships, but I know for women leaving men, the statistic is it takes a woman on average 7 attempts to actually leave before she actually stays gone, because that it's just so addictive psychologically. We get so addicted to these people. It's an incredibly common thing, which is, in my opinion, like why we see the 12-step program for not just drug addiction or shopping addiction or sex addiction, but also dysfunctional and abusive relationships. And that particular fellowship is called ACA, Adult Children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families because the psychology is similar. And so look into it, look it up. You'll probably learn something. And another great resource on this type of psychology is, I might be getting the book name wrong, I'm just kind of paraphrasing, but it's written by a woman called Alexandra, either Steen or Stein. I'm not too sure how to pronounce her name. But the book is called Love, Terror, Brainwashing. And she talks so much about this mix of love and terror and how that is kind of like a kiss of death, really, for so many of these relationships. And we see this in cult psychology. We see this in abusive families. We see this in abusive relationships. And it creates this strong pull on the person's brain who is being abused. Like you're afraid of the person, but you also love them. And they also treat you like shit, but sometimes they're nice. And so it becomes this very confusing thing for the brain, and it becomes very difficult to leave. Which, in my opinion, is why it's always great to leave as soon as humanly possible, like in the first few months of a connection, if you notice any of those red flags, or if you notice that particular thing happening to your brain, if you notice this mix of love and meanness, of kindness and cruelty, as soon as you notice that up and down, hot, cold, that is a red flag, and you should stop that connection, in my opinion. At the same time, leaving is when women are most in danger of being killed. So that's another thing. So if you are in that situation yourself, I'm really praying that no one listening to this is in that situation. But if you are, like, please seek out resources, supports, make a plan, be safe. There are experts in helping women escape with their lives. So please seek those out if you are in that kind of situation. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. So just like be aware and be safe and be, what's the word? Be methodical, be thoughtful, be smart about it. And so it brings back to the podcast theme. Love is not enough. Don't use love to make excuses for people mistreating you. Don't use love as an excuse of why you should stay with someone who you're afraid of. You deserve better than that. The world is full of so many people. And if the person who is your lover, your partner, your husband, your wife, if you are afraid of that person, if you can't be yourself around that person, if you feel like shit around that person, probably you're not in a good situation. And probably you need to make a change. Love is not enough. It just isn't. Does love matter? Yes. Is it an important part of the equation? Of course, it's an important part of the equation. I would not want to be married to someone I didn't love or be in a serious long-term committed relationship with someone I didn't love, of course. But let us not be blinded by the illusion of love or by the word love. I think that word often gets used to manipulate and put the blinders on us. And oftentimes we'll also put the blinders on ourselves because we don't always want to see the situation that we're in. Oftentimes we want to hide because when we see the situation that we're in, it's going to mean that we have to do something about it. And that thing can be really difficult, ripping off the band-aid, leaving, moving out, getting divorced, whatever it happens to be. And one big thing that I think can be really useful for perspective on this topic, and I've asked this to clients before, just as a thought experiment, because my clients are just so lovely and have such nice things to say about me. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys always makes me feel so warm and fuzzy. So I'll ask this about me, I'll ask this about their friends, and I'll ask this about their kids. And so I'll often say, what would you say to me if I was in the same relationship that you're in right now? Would you want my marriage to be like yours? Would you want my spouse to treat me the way your spouse treats you? What would you say if that was the case? And that kind of like hits a little bit usually. And then I'll say, what about your best friend? What would you say if your best friend was being treated by their spouse the way that your spouse is treating you? And then, okay, that hits in even more. And then the kids example, that's when it really lands. So I think most parents want the absolute best for their kids. And parents often are willing to accept abuse upon themselves that they would never want for their children. And so like kids learn from their parents though, right? And so we are that example to our children. That's how they learn what is normal in relationships. And so that usually is what helps people understand, oh shit, I need to make a change. This isn't love, and or love should not look like this. Love should not feel like this. I'm looking for a different type of love. And oftentimes that's going to have to start with self-love. That's okay. Start somewhere. You are worthy of more. I always tell people this. It's so true. It's so true. And so if you take anything from this episode, I hope you take 10 steps back and look at your relationships. Maybe your past relationships, maybe one you are in right now that just needs another look. Perhaps you are a parent and thinking about relationships that your kids are in. Maybe you don't have kids, but are a mentor or an aunt or uncle or a trusted community member. It's important that we all know about dysfunction, we know the warning signs, and we step up to help people see the situations that they are in. We never know how long we live on this planet, and I think more of our days than not should be healthy, happy, joyful. I would rather be alone than with someone who treats me badly, and that's what I would want for everyone else as well. So I know it's kind of dark. Sorry about that. If you're interested in this topic, please do check out some of those resources that I've mentioned. If you have not seen the documentary, do check it out. I do think it's worth seeing. It's honestly depressed me a bit that I've seen people making fun of her and being like, "Well, you know what? She sounds annoying. I would have killed her too." And it's like, ugh, like I just find it the most obnoxious shit ever when people joke about women being murdered. I just have no patience for it. Like it's just, come on, grow up, get a life is like kind of how I feel about that personally. It's kind of vile. It's not my thing. So it's something that we should all care about. It's all of our responsibility. Wherever you go, there you are. You are going to know somebody who is in a bad relationship, most likely. Especially so many of us know so many people. We're so much more connected than we used to be, especially with social media. And this stuff is a lot more common than people would like to think that it is. And it is all of our responsibility to learn more about this and hold ourselves up to better standards and help people. And if you are in a loving, joyful, fucking awesome relationship, high five for me. I think that's amazing. And share that. That's another thing I'm going to say to all the happy, in love people in healthy relationships is be that shining star example to your friend group, to your family, to your community. Be that example that shows other people who are struggling, wow, this is fucking possible. I could have a relationship like this because those people do. Why can't I have that? And you could be that shining star example that inspires someone to leave an abusive or shitty relationship when they see the example of your healthy, happy one. So don't be ashamed or embarrassed or like you're bragging because you're in a happy, healthy, amazing, loving partnership. Like, please share that. The world needs more positive examples of healthy, loving relationships. That needs to be normalized, in my opinion, so that people will then see more easily what an unhealthy one actually looks like and have more strength and courage and ability to leave. sooner. Okay, I know, heavy things, but I just think this is so important. Love is not sufficient. Love is not sufficient. Check out some of the resources I mentioned. Always more to learn. You can check me out at sabrinamscott.com. Of course, I'm on Instagram, Sabrina M. Scott, on YouTube at Sabrina Scott. And I am accepting coaching clients over the next few months. So if you are in a challenging situation or you just feel weird in your life, if you want to shake things up, if you want to get closer to who you really are, but you're not too sure how, spiritually or otherwise, I'm your girl. Hit me up at ceo@sabrinamscott.com or just send a little hello in the contact form on my website. As I've said a million times, you guys know I'm not a therapist. I am not a psychologist, psychiatrist, or anything accredited of that nature. At the same time, I have helped a lot of people. I'm not a therapist, so you will still need therapy. That's not what I do, but coaching does something entirely different and it helps people make action now as opposed to 10 years from now. So, coaching, therapy, all of that, they each have their role in a healthy ecosystem. In my opinion, I think we are all parts of a community of care, and I always tell the folks I work with, please get a therapist also, if you don't already have one. So if you're interested in working with me, do hit me up. I would love to help you claim your magic and change your life. And that's it. That's it. That's it. Talk to you guys soon. Take care.